Echo 28 Bravo, 8:30 or something, 8:33, let's say. I made a video on my channel several months ago looking for a partner to learn longterm and Toki Pona. I don't have a partner for learning either yet, but several people did contact me, and I almost had a partner a couple times. So very exciting, and so I would like someone to share my work with on the mind. I want to try explaining to someone one-on-one and sort of tracking the progress of explaining to someone well, the things that I've learned and the things that have been learned recently. I'm not proud of my opening so far, but I've got some books here in front of me, so maybe that'll inspire me. I have not finished this, but this is one of the books I have out. The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, Jonathan Haidt. He talks about, we're in the chapter, The Intuitive Dog and the Rational Tail. Michael Shermer's The Believing Brain, from spiritual faith to political convictions. It's not going to be a book club, but just want to show you what the stuff is based on. This explains everything, some really good chapters in that. You Are Not So Smart by David McRaney. How Minds Change by David McRaney. Steven Pinker, Rationality. We're reading two right now that have we're gonna see how much they contribute, but they're teaching me some important things. I'm really disappointed in this video. I'm not feeling this video right now. There's No Self, No Problem: How Neuropsychology is Catching Up to Buddhism, and there's On Being Certain, written by a neurologist, about the feeling of knowing, and he's saying that the feeling of knowing is a primal emotion. It doesn't have to be tied to anything. It can arrive spontaneously, without any sort of a reference, like a particular fact or something, or a particular understanding or evidence. So that's a pretty big deal. All right, I'm gonna try this video again later. True or not true? Echo 28 Bravo 1840, let's say. True or not true? It is common for us to hate someone without saying anything to them. I'm not including like people that you don't know, public figures and stuff, but people that you've encountered in social situations. You've maybe kind of known them for years, see them every once in a while, can't stand them. Never said anything to them, or whatever. Okay, second question. If that, I'm assuming that you said that that's common. Sorry. For those who said that it's common, I wonder whether that's a change. See, I would be tempted to say that that wasn't the case before, but maybe that's the noble savage fallacy. That wasn't the case before. It's only the case today because we don't get to really build up trust with people, even people that especially people that we dislike. Whereas with constant exposure, maybe in some idyllic past, I imagine, with constant exposure, well, you do express it. It's not going to cause a huge problem. You guys live and work together, so everybody's going to get over it. Or you spend so much time together that it just, at some point, it comes out. Fuck, you drive me fucking crazy. Why do you always do that? Blah, 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 or something. Whereas today, our relationships don't, even with the people, or the people with the, you know what I'm trying to say, right? Anyway, that's the question. End of question. Echo 29 Charlie 1703. I don't have a therapist, but I said I don't have a therapist, but you don't mind, do you? I actually want you to be closer to me. Closer. All right, that's fine. There's no self. So, the things I'm experiencing is me and true, and even like maybe a lasting difference, or there's something I feel like it's changed. That might be absolute bullshit. We'll see, and maybe this isn't even the first time this has happened, but I know it's not the first time that I've felt good. But it's actually not even that. I don't actually feel particularly good. It's all right. Long story short, all right, we're gonna talk about suicide. So turn it off now. If this message is for you, then this message is for you. I mean, to turn it off now. If the turn off now is not necessary for you, stick around and work through this with me. All right, long story short, spoiler alert. I had a crazy thought today about committing to living. Now, I don't want, it's not committing to being healthy. It's not committing to securing a future for myself. That I doubt I would ever commit to that. Something pretty dramatic would have to happen. But committing to being a little healthy, and maybe being okay with the idea that if the tobacco doesn't take me, then I might be here for like a normal human lifespan. Now, if you're watching this in 2024, well, maybe you're missing context because there's a lot of videos that I haven't had the nerve to publish. So they're unlisted or private, where I work through some of these things. A lot of them is me talking about how I'm gonna go, and then maybe like one or two is like brainstorm about how I could possibly stay. This is probably gonna be the first one where I don't know. All right, let me get to it. But this isn't for public viewing. I mean, you have to understand just in case this video gets like 300 views or something. It can't possibly, but just in case, I still have to say, I have 197 subscribers. At most, I get like 150 people that watch like a minute of a certain video and not one of these. So I'm hoping that I'm in the clear. I can only imagine. I can't really imagine people watching this if I to get myself to publish it or something. I don't know whether that's true. I don't know what's going on. All right, this is not how I imagined starting the video. Also, oh, one thing I did imagine saying, and I know it doesn't sound good, and maybe it is bad, but no, I'm standing by it, is that if you have never been suicidal, or if you're like a 9 to 5, uh, anybody who ever considers suicide is clearly mentally ill, blah blah blah. Do me the courtesy. You can watch this and you can think of me as mentally ill partially, but do me the courtesy of not of no matter how much you feel that you know this, and actually this there's no point in saying this. It's not like this works on split brain patients when they confabulate, but no matter how, just do me the courtesy of not believing that you understand. Um, so, all right. So now I guess I'm picturing an audience. It's not the people that I imagine actually coming across on YouTube, but I'm imagining the best audience, kind of faceless, and I'm telling those, um, So some of you have stayed despite the trigger warning, and but some of you, it's gonna be like all about life, and all about happiness and everything, and you're happy, or you've struggled, but you still, life is valuable and life is a beautiful thing, and blah blah. I see you've stayed. I see that you're definitely one of those pointing to the back of the room. No, pointing to the front. But just do me and those guys in the back. Do us the courtesy of not letting us know that you think you understand, because we know that you don't. Because I feel like it will be reduced, the things that I'm going to express, but that could just be, I could also be wrong. Oh gosh, it's disgusting. You can't see good. Ugh. Okay. I think I fucked this up. I'm imagining the wrong thing. I think that I've gotten in my head about it. I want to just be able to speak from the heart, but now I'm definitely speaking to an audience. By the way, if I do get through this, so we're going to be interrupted a few times by little glimpses of Dashcam. Anytime my dad and I chat today, this audio is gonna cut off, and you're gonna see it, and then it'll replay like the last 5 seconds or something. If I feel up to it, maybe I'll maybe before it cuts off, this part of the video, this me here, this hello, will start to go black and white. So then if you want, you can be like, okay, let me try to remember what he's saying now, so when he picks up on what he's talking about. I gotta stop imagining the audience. All right, well, that's enough of that. All right, so fuck, I've messed this up. All right, maybe I can get back into it. No, because if I, especially telling you context, getting caught up, I'm really gonna have the audience in mind. And I was thinking about reading what I wrote in my journal, but that's on you on the phone, or it's on my computer, but that's connected to a hard drive. I don't remember to pull that outside. All right, listen here, pal. All right, maybe I need to sit up. Maybe I feel silly lying down. Okay. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's just jump into it. Matrix. Um, Context. What's and this is not the right frame. I'm not in the right. Okay. Fucked up the beginning. Life is good. Life is an amazing opportunity to do those things that whatever you're programmed to do. Life is sort of about contentment. I mean, there are lots of ways you could define sort of the meaning of life. You could say it's about surviving and reproducing if you want. But we've got these complicated brains where we've got all these abstractions and then categories and all these interpretations and representations and oh my goodness. So let's say that for like there's no inherent there's no inherent purpose of life, because purpose sort of supposes a result or a future, but there is an inherent sort of, how do I say this, there's a purpose by design, but it's not necessarily a purpose in the sense of something for the future. So we are sort of designed, like sort of our prerogative, just like any organism, is essentially to survive and reproduce. Now, we've got a lot of brain activity that it can quite easily get bored with just that. It can feel like we need something more. And some people are programmed needing something, I guess, maybe more to. That's not what I want to say. And actually, I wasn't going to put myself with those people. You're thinking, no, I wasn't. I'm not trying to say, oh, you guys are out here happy because you're just happy feeding and fucking, but me, I wanted more and can't get it. No, that's not it. All right. Gosh, language is hard, isn't it? Because purpose involves intention. Purpose involves that something was designed for a purpose, and then so if it doesn't achieve that purpose, then something's off. Gosh, no, I'm really messing this up, and I don't even know how much time I have. Let's say you have a few options for purposes. We have to define purpose. I thought you were taking a nap, buddy. You couldn't sleep. (1723). If one wants to teach people about cognitive biases and the reliability of our decision-making processes and the value of intellectual humility, they could do that through, you said, they could be a teacher, especially a primary school teacher, be a lecturer, or they could be like a consultant. Or a writer. So if we take those four options, my original plan was to be a consultant with my consulting firm, Servo. What was it? Writer, teacher, consultant, and lecturer. The original plan was to be a consultant. And then after being a consultant, the original plan was to be a consultant. The original plan was to be a professor and do research. Yeah. But it wasn't really about teaching people about cognitive biases. It was just about, so it wasn't really clear yet. Then once I got into the cognitive biases thing, it was about being a consultant and then spending my later years developing educational curricula. As you know, I've gone with lecturer. So I think you're right, that you've nailed it. Those four are fantastic options. And I've gone with lecturer and street preacher. Because preacher was probably the fifth option, right?
I was going to mention street preacher.
Oh, yeah. And then a writer, yeah. I came up with an idea yesterday for an allegory, kind of. Not really, but it's more of just, I guess, a metaphor. Not at all. It's just, anyway. A story with you. You're the main character. A frank story. How a certain man learned truth. Isn't that good? Frank, like honest, right? Certain, like how a man in particular, but also a man who's quite certain of the things that he believes. So then there's that certainty and truth, right? And then there's the story of going and doing all that. So yeah, so that's what I've gone with, lecturer and writer.
And then cognitive biases really do, correct me if I'm wrong, really do fall under the umbrella of decision making. Because that's where they...
What did you just say?
Cognitive biases come under the umbrella of decision making because that's when your biases are critical to the kind of decisions you make.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And what did you say also, though? You said, correct me what?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh.
So the big umbrella is I'm just saying the big umbrella is decision making, which in cognitive biases come under that, because that's when, if you have bias, if you do, like sunk, when you sunk, the sunk fallacy business, it affects your decision.
That's a great example of a bias involved in decision making, and that's what the big focus is on, about biases in decision making. Yeah. Now, can I add a clarification about cognitive biases? You're shaking your head.
No. It's the sun.
Okay, but can I?
Yeah.
Okay. The mind is modular. And maybe when modular, we imagine a dozen pieces. We can imagine it instead as maybe a bunch of elements, constituents, competing, collaborating, interacting. And sometimes the mind makes decisions. sometimes the mind judges things without even assigning words, but so sometimes you wouldn't sort of call it conscious judging, but every moment we are constantly receiving information and categorizing it and judging it, right? Right? Is that right?
Yeah.
So the mind can make decisions, can judge, it perceives, even basic perception depends on those modules. Sensation, interpretation, kind of like judgment. So if the building blocks of the mind are modules, then studying how those modules interact and what those modules are, what they've evolved to be, would have implications for decision making, romance, anything that the mind does. You know what I mean? So, in my book on Being Certain, he was talking about a lot of split brain patients, and he's talking about confabulation, the narratives we come up with to justify our interpretations or to resolve cognitive dissonance, for instance. And those are going to be involved at some point in a decision, but those are really interesting. Just the fact that a split brain patient, could pick out the right image corresponding to a word he heard, but because it's his right brain that heard it, when he has to then explain his choice, his right brain has no language, so he can't, but he still does, he makes up an explanation. And that's really, really important, that we do that. It's also really important that neurologist Dr. Burton says that certainty is a primal emotion, because it can arise spontaneously. It doesn't need to be linked to any kind of a thought, let alone evidence. So decision-making is a part of it, but so is, well before decision-making, the reception of the information. But that's kind of where we are now in 2024, is we're interested in decision making. But more and more, even things like the concept of self, which is not necessarily a decision. But how does that arise and how is it maintained?
So how can you not be lonely?
Well, how can I not be lonely? That's the thing. I will always be lonely, and it's about being okay with that. And I was watching the new Matrix movie, started it last night, and maybe we can try to get on the TV and watch it together at some point. But I felt okay with being lonely. I felt okay with the idea that when I'm speaking to another mind, I'm going to see it from a background of this is what the mind is and this is how it functions. And I know about confabulation. I know about the stuff we make up. I know about the feeling of knowing how somebody can have zero reason for believing something is true, but still have that feeling of knowing. And I know that if I'm talking to someone who has that feeling of knowing but can't come up with good evidence, I'm going to be tempted to say to that person, this is what I call the agit. That's sort of the lawyers of the mind who, they don't even care about what information exists in the mind. They just try to make the point that they're trying to make. You understand? So I would be tempted to do that. But I've learned from the last few years that doesn't work either. And the research says it doesn't work. You can tell a split brain patient, no, actually the reason you laughed is not because you found something funny. It's because I just told you to laugh, but it was only you didn't process it with your left brain. So basically, It's like living in a mental hospital.
So you're okay with being lonely?
I'm okay with being lonely by taking solace in the idea that my memory won't be lonely. That I'll have been remembered as someone who lived in the Matrix while knowing it was the Matrix and surrounded by people who didn't know. Or as living in a mental hospital with people who didn't know, blah, blah.
No, you know that social interaction is good for the health of the person, right?
I know, and that's what was so frustrating. That's why it was not easy to be okay being lonely, because I know how much I need that. I know how much I enjoy it.
Well, why not think about putting yourself in a situation where you've got social interaction?
Because I put myself in a lot of situations where have got social reaction, and those didn't go well, and that was before I understood the mind. I thought my understanding of the mind would help me, and it does in some ways, but it's also more distancing, because I know what's happening, what the error that the other person is making, and they're telling me that they're not making an error. So it's just like there's this glass between us.
But if you can come up with ways of helping other people like you,
Yeah, and that's
society.
yeah, well, yeah.
So not many people, have parents who are going to support a 34-year-old, so these people struggle.
Yeah, and I don't take it for granted that I am able to, with my channel, there can be videos on my channel that maybe sometime in the future someone in a similar situation to me can find and be comforted. Like how I was comforted by watching The Matrix last night, or the first 20 minutes anyway. And then the other thing is, either way, regardless of whether or not I can be okay being lonely, in either case, I feel very empowered by a mission that I take very seriously, which is to contribute to a future culture where, I wouldn't feel so lonely if other people knew that they were brains and had some basic sense of how brains function. So I want to contribute to that. I also wouldn't feel so lonely if there was a system in place for how to discuss things, and also how to evaluate what someone else says, and also how to transmit knowledge.
So for instance, you take the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Analyzing how that came about, because people, there's one side and this side, and they're seeing a completely different situation from each other.
That's right.
Now, I think I see it correctly, and I think all these other people are propagandized.
Hold on. I have never heard you speak like that.
Hold on. Let me say this. So, there's a need for people to analyze the situation.
Yes.
And now, and to know, first, the objective is peace. So
right.
How do you reach out to these people, so that they come to a common understanding which leads to peace?
That's right.
Okay? So there's projects there.
Let me tell you, please, you don't know how happy I am to have this opportunity to tell you about something. I like verbal feedback.
Was that?
I like verbal feedback.
I want to hear what you got to say.
All right. Okay. ERIS stands for empiricism, reason, imagination, skepticism. I maintain those as the 4 values that we need to know things and also not make mistakes or correct for mistakes. Okay? Be empirical, be reasonable. So empirical, get information from the world. Reasonable, treat that information correctly, quote unquote. Imaginative, imagine alternatives. Skepticism, be prepared for alternatives. Right? Okay, so now the application of those principles is called alaris. Just put an al before it from the Arabic the, so the aris. Okay, so it's the application of it, the noun form. Okay, there are three alarises. There's monalaris, which is an individual's. Okay. Which is an individual's evaluation of what someone else has said. So you come across an article, you come across a TikTok, whatever, and suppose that you want to know, I disagree with this person. Should I be taking this seriously, what this person has said? Do I need to reevaluate? So there's an alaris pre-checklist, or a monalaris pre-checklist. Certain things, certain red flags to look out for. Certain pathic language, for instance. Certain repetitions. I haven't really figured it out yet, but I've come up with a couple things for the pre-checklist. Anybody who says that, science is only a method of knowing things, dismiss it. Stuff like that, And then you get into the actual treatment. First thing you have to do is you have to establish the problem, what I call the ESSIC, which is the question on which there's the disagreement, which is often not explicit. So you have to write that out. Then you have to write out the relevant claims. Your case, or if you're doing a meta-analysis just trying to evaluate someone else, their case. Then what you need to do is phrase their case as an if-then statement. If this, then that, with their conclusion being the then. Okay, then, based on what they've said, you try to identify the component statements. So you try to do an if-then sequence with some parallel if-thens that will finish in their ultimate case then. Now, that's the first step. Knowing what we know about psychology, we know that stuff can't be done out loud. And the brain can't work with all of this stuff. We don't have good working memory for that. We think we have good enough, we don't. So we have to write all these things down so we can give our system to its, which are the more higher cognition its, a chance to really engage with the material. Okay, now once you've written down a variety of if-then statements that the person seems to be basing their argument on, for instance.
It's open?
Yeah.
I don't see it open.
Well, I see it open.
Okay, you gonna go and see the guy? But you look such a mess. Jesus.
Well, what do we need to go see? We're all ready. We want to go in?
Yeah.
No, I told him 11.
We can just wait here.
Yeah, all right.
We can just talk about life and death.
Yeah. What comes to mind when you think of life and death?
There's a big difference between living organisms and non-living matter. So I know you dismissed the quantum aspect of it, but maybe that's the secret. The fact that life makes use of quantum capabilities.
Maybe.
There's increasing interest in quantum biology.
Yeah.
Scientific America got a recent article on quantum biology.
Yeah.
Ourselves, because there's something almost magical about life. It's so different from non-life.
Yeah.
That
mind has a hard time understanding how, from complexity, magical things can emerge without being magical. How?
Well, complexity gives right. Well, if somehow the quantum effects have enabled things, whatever.
Yeah.
That
makes
it's not. I mean, it's not magical. It appears magical, but it's not. But yeah. I mean, consciousness is amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Totally amazing.
One thing that I was thinking about is that if we have an understanding of how, through quantum mechanics, consciousness functions, I wonder how many people go, Okay, yeah, but consciousness isn't just that. It's something else, something special. Like if we break it down, whether people will become dissatisfied with the explanation of quantum mechanics when there's less mystery.
Yeah, there'll always comes, you know.
Yeah, but
I mean, if the more we know about stuff, the more amazing it is, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's just like,
Except
you know, like who's that guy? The evolutionary
Dawkins, he said
Dawkins
that when you break down the rows of the rainbow,
is still
it
beautiful.
makes it even more beautiful.
Yeah.
But see, Dawkins is actually a great example of somebody who's not going to say anything about quantum consciousness.
No, because he's
Well, because he is actually satisfied with the biological complexities, an evolutionary biologist. So he is satisfied with and finds the beauty in that explanation. He doesn't need anything else to explain it.
right, but he is old school. Most of the genes don't. Most I read just the other day there's only 1% of your genes are responsible for proteins.
Okay.
Genes also produce RNA,
Yeah,
and RNA as a regulatory function
can produce
on,
proteins.
well, no, on the
Oh,
genome.
oh, right. Okay.
So it's a lot more complex than people like Dawkins. Things have moved on from the Dawkins
I see.
era.
Okay.
In the Dawkins era, it was just genes to produce proteins, and it was you know relatively almost simple. But
Okay.
now there's much more evidence. It's way more complicated than that, and amazing. And I think you know,
In any case, Dawkins, what he likes though is wondering, trying to find answers. I doubt he'd be closed off to that stuff. Quantum, I think he would
well,
be
for the
dissatisfied.
whole period of time when people thought, quantum only works at and you only see quantum effects at ultra cold temperatures and all that kind of stuff. You don't see it in classical. There's a classical world and the quantum world, and they're two separate things. They're not two separate things.
Okay.
The classical, what we know sees the classical world, is actually from the quantum world.
Uh-huh.
It's built upon the quantum world. Now, if life is able to use these quantum effects at body temperature, by like that mathematician, what's his name, from Cambridge, the tubules,
The microtubules.
microtubules theory, and so on and so forth. But it really needs close examination,
Yeah.
and it could explain a lot.
What's something it could explain?
Well, I mean, it could give rise to explain, how we're able to consciousness and
Yeah, but consciousness is a word. Like what's something about consciousness it could
well,
explain?
how we have this ability to synthesize the various senses into something which we know is consciousness. Whatever, I don't know. The fact that we're able to think, and decision making too. I mean, how does the brain make decisions?
And then yeah, it'd be interesting to see how through quantum mechanics
The brain does make
the
decisions.
brain makes decisions. And then what would you do with the decision researched and the explanations that we have now that explain it with networks?
What, like computer network?
No, with neural networks.
Well, it could be.
Like for
I don't know.
instance, moral research about like experiments with moral decision making, like the trolley dilemma, and how we've observed the interplay between the ventral medial prefrontal cortex and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And we see that when there's more activity in one, then we tend to make a decision that's going to be more sort of
Yeah, but you're
Machiavellian.
talking about more the macro level. I'm talking about how that works at the quantum level almost, what the quantum involvement is in that.
Yeah. So how the quantum enables the
Yeah.
dorsolateral and the ventral medial to communicate. Seems to be basing their argument on. For instance, let's say they said, you can't listen to her. Look at this video of her being ridiculous. So basically you phrase that as, if the person is ridiculous, then what they say is not true, right? So you formulate everything with language. Okay. Now, you've already learned, by the way, in order to do an allarys, you already have to know a couple hundred errors, whether you call them fallacies, biases, illusions, whatever. So you have your formal fallacies and then your informal fallacies. Yeah. So you already have a few hundred of these, which you couldn't list off, but you kind of know. Now, you look at the statements. Do you see any of those? By the way, all of those fallacies can be phrased as if-then, such as that's a fallacy if someone, it's kind of an ad hominem fallacy, right? If someone is ridiculous, then what they say is not true, right? So if someone's personality is negative, then their knowledge is false. That is a fallacy. And so then you might recognize that, for instance, right? And so then you evaluate this, and basically in the system, I'm imagining that it's numbered. You try to do 10 component statements. If more than half of them already you can see the fallacy, you don't have to take the thing seriously. Okay. Now, there's a more advanced analysis, which is how to actually study the thing. If you want to take it seriously, how to actually learn from it. But that logicians have kind of already done, sort of. Okay, next is dialysis. Two people disagree, and they're engaging about it in order to try to find truth, resolve the problem, the essay, right? So in this case, we do the same thing. We write out our statements, and we check each other's statements. That's going to be like the first step. Then the second step is, okay, using the true statements and trying to put them together, I don't know, and then some third step. Okay. Finally, for the three alarises, there's we alaris. Now, we alaris can be one of two things. It's either a group has discovered some truth, some scientists have discovered some truth. Hey, biological evolution happened via natural selection. And then we alaris is the process by which that is transmitted. With empiricism, with reason, with imagination, with skepticism, and also with an understanding of psychology, which I call critical recognition. The other we alaris is spectating. So when two people are debating, because humans are very good at debate, not very good at discussion. So we should take advantage of that. We have two claims represented about the same essay, and we have those people debate. And the debate's going to be kind of illogical and shit and stuff. But the spectators, with their critical recognition and with their ability to observe and see the mistakes and so on, will still be able to learn and maybe determine, oh, you know what, that guess is more valuable than the other guess. Even regardless of who won the debate or whatever, but just by what comes out. Because that's how we evolved. We evolved to basically believe in our point and argue it, and we're all supposed to do that in community, and then the community is supposed to find the truth. We individually sort of aren't supposed to find the truth. We're supposed to just argue our point like lawyers in a courtroom. So that's the project that I'm working on next. Really,
have you applied it to a real world situation?
No, I haven't even broken it down yet. But in the script that I want to write, the story of Frank, I'm going to be applying it. And in fact, you're going to be applying it. You're the protagonist of the story. And you're going to be applying it with all that you've learned about the sense of self and decision making and all that stuff. And so then when you have a conflict with someone, you're going to use a dialysis. But I'm not yet at the step to use it on subjects because I haven't even developed it yet. But what I have done is I've gotten the basics, because now I'm in the application stage, I said, right? For let's say 15 years of my life, I was really confused by human minds. Okay, really, really confused. No. Let's say for 30 years. But let's say for the last, since I was, 20, specifically I've been looking at cognition and beliefs and cognitive errors and so on. Okay. So I developed an immense understanding and some great metaphors to communicate that understanding. Now, and so that I have sort of applied. I have Jeremy. I was able to transmit it to him. Leo. Sat, I'm going to do next.
So, wait a minute. So have you applied to, you transmitted it, but you haven't applied it to real world situation?
No, what's it?
So?
What's it? If it is the problem-solving Alaris methods, I haven't even developed them yet. But what I have developed is the understanding on which they are based. Not the understanding of logic, but the understanding of psychology, what I call critical recognition. So I know sort of what to look out for and I've developed a good sense of, well, I don't really know because I have to develop something so I can go test it. But even without that technique, what I have developed is an understandable and explanatory metaphor for the mind that helps us move away from the dangerous illusions that are keeping us from trying to be reasonable. Because right now we're not even trying to be reasonable, right? Dialaris, these are attempts to try to be reasonable, right? People aren't trying to be reasonable, right? Nobody's out there hungry for an attempt. Gosh, I see an argument. I'm not sure how to evaluate it. No, they're just evaluating it, right? And trusting whatever impression they have, right? Give me a right on that last one. Right. So what I have developed is a way for them, well, not a way. I have developed a metaphor by which they can be motivated to want to try to be reasonable, to accept that they are not already reasonable, and to try to be reasonable, to accept the amount that their minds fill in the gaps when they think that they've reasoned, they think they've gone through information, arrived at a conclusion. That impression sometimes is based on absolutely nothing. So I come up with the metaphor that I know is useful because of the number of times where now I'm no longer confused by humans. I can say, oh, that's that module. And I'm working on now also as far as the theoretical component, not the application, but what I call a map it, which is sort of a mapping the modules that interacted, right? So you do a simple series of if-then, right? But you're going to have some sort of be parallel and interact. So you have the in livery, which is the input, and you've got in your bottom processing centers, you've got, for instance, in it that is, if the wavelength is in the low 400s, then this is purple, something like that. It's not in the low 400s, but it'll be like whatever. Anyway, so I've made, although it's obvious, all of it theory and the metaphor, in hindsight, every time I talk to people, I realize how important and how useful it is. It's useful for me in understanding other people. It's understandable to other people. In quarantine, in fact, she would say to me, when I explained to her that I changed, and this really demonstrates that she understood it. When I explained to her, I said to her that something I read to her is evidence for it theory, but doesn't go far enough. Because it talks about these different sort of entities in the mind rather than mechanics. And the word in French that we had used for entity, she said, yeah, but the problem with that is, I didn't say it in that moment. She said, yeah, but the problem with that is it makes it seem like it's there are these different complete entities interacting rather than these various components interacting. As I understood from it theory, and you can't believe how good this feels to talk about that she said that she got that, So yeah, so I'm really proud of myself, and whether or not I can feel okay with the loneliness, the one thing I know I can feel is fulfilled and proud.